killer waves, like the ones recorded in this news footage, visit their shores with frightening regularity. But even the Japanese can be taken by surprise. In 1993, a quake off the coast of Okushiri Island generates tsunami waves that reach shore in less than 10 minutes. It's the middle of the night, and most do not have time to evacuate. One of the lucky ones is television cameraman Hiroshi Nakamura, who records his own escape on video.
There was a straight road from our hotel to the hills. We reached the crossroads as we were driving to the hills. Usually we would turn to the left. But the driver saw something like white waves ahead on his left side. The disaster I saw from the hill was just like a war movie. The devastation was something that made a strong impression on me. The fact that the whole town vanished is something I haven't forgotten.
Nearly 200 died that night in Okushiri. On the southern tip of the island, where there were hundreds of homes, only rubble remained. Dr. Eddie Bernard arrived in Okushiri 2 days later with a special tsunami task force.
Well, my emotional reaction was, it was like being at ground zero of an atomic bomb or something. Just, you couldn't believe the destruction. I mean, the power of these waves was far more than I had expected. Although I've been studying this phenomenon for 25 years, I'd never seen the power of a devastating tsunami and what it actually could do. And you just look at some of the structures that were ripped apart. You saw how things were destroyed entirely. Then you start to appreciate the forces at work here. Looking at a photograph of a young girl who wasn't too much older than my daughter at that time really brought home the fact that most of the people who died in this event were young children or the elderly. What we actually could see was the remnants of people's lives. Then you realize that these 500 homes had destroyed the lives of hundreds of families. And of course, death was part of that process. And so you had to be very respectful of what we were actually looking at. Although it was scientifically important, we didn't want to be disrespectful for those people who had passed away. And it motivated me as a research scientist to realize that the real reason for studying tsunamis in research mode is to save a few lives. And that's the bottom line.
Today, Okushiri is slowly recovering from its tragedy. The people are rebuilding their homes and repairing their lives. But because space is at a premium here, most new homes must be built where the old ones stood, making them just as vulnerable to the next tsunami. There is one spot, however, that will probably never be rebuilt. The devastated southern tip of the island will likely remain an empty zone, a reminder of what was taken by the sea. "200 miles to the south is another town that has long suffered the ravages of tsunamis. Over the past century, Taro has seen 3,000 of its citizens swept away. The people of this town have learned to carry on in the face of tragedy, to live with the continual threat of disaster. The last great wave struck here in 1933. It left Taro in ruins and wiped out nearly a quarter of its population. A year later, the survivors fought back. They built a wall to keep the sea in check the next time it rose. Today, the wall dominates the town, a reinforced concrete battlement 34 feet high, and in some spots 80 feet thick. For the people of Taro, it's become a familiar and reassuring part of the landscape.
In the summer, the seawall gets warmed up, and I can't sleep because the heat reflects off of it. At that time, I wish there were no seawall, but I never forget its reason for existing. If there were no wall, I wouldn't want to live here.
Taro is also protected by its own tsunami warning center. Besides the usual satellite technology, there are video cameras, permitting technicians to monitor the harbor 24 hours a day, looking for changes in sea levels and awaiting the inevitable. And if alarms are sounded, Taro is ready. Crack teams of gatekeepers carry out regular drills, closing the wall's 6 doors against the sea. Each of the massive steel doors must be sealed in under 4 minutes. They've never been tested against a major tsunami. The seawall certainly offers the people of Taro a measure of comfort, but that may not be enough. Its 34-foot height should stop most waves, but the infamous tsunami of 1896 had waves over 90 feet high. There's just no way to know how big the next one will be. Back on the wave-ravaged island of Okushiri, they're building their own wall. When it's completed, it will surround nearly a quarter of the island, providing at least partial protection against the next tsunami. But the people of Okushiri haven't put all their faith in reinforced concrete. In a ceremony held every June, they pay homage to the dead, including hundreds of tsunami victims, enshrining their memories in stone. As darkness falls, a bonfire is lit to serve as a beacon, guiding home those who are lost to the waves. Paper lanterns symbolize the souls of the victims, released once again to the sea. It is an act of remembrance and perhaps a prayer for deliverance. The threat of tsunami is not as distant as most of us think. Half a world away from the fishing villages of Japan lies the northwest coast of the United States. The town of Crescent City, California, shares a tragic legacy with Taro and Okushiri. People here can still recall their own encounter with a deadly wave. March 27, 1964, Good Friday. A violent earthquake off the coast of Alaska generates an enormous tsunami. The Pacific coast of North America, from Vancouver to San Diego, lies in its path. At 11 that night, Crescent City's Civil Defense Chief Bill Parker receives urgent news.
My first experience with a tsunami was a teletype that came into our office and said